The cathedral doors burst open, and every head turned to see a 12-year-old black girl standing breathless, clutching an envelope like her life depended on it. Ethan Caldwell, tech billionaire, was seconds away from marrying Charlotte Whitmore, the perfect socialite bride, when the girl grabbed his hand and whispered, "Please, you have to come now." Security moved to remove her, but something in her desperate eyes made Ethan hesitate. And what he didn't know was that this terrified child held evidence of a conspiracy 9 years in the making. The man who'd orchestrated it all sat in the front pew, smiling like he'd already won, but he hadn't counted on one thing. That truth, once unleashed, refuses to stay buried, and it was about to cost him everything. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The morning sun cast golden light through the tall windows of the Caldwell estate, illuminating a scene of controlled chaos. Ethan Caldwell stood before a full-length mirror while his best man adjusted his tie for the third time. At 38, Ethan had built an empire from nothing. Caldwell Technologies had revolutionized cloud computing and made him one of the youngest billionaires in America. Today should have been the culmination of everything he'd worked toward. Not just business success, but personal happiness. "You look like you're about to give a shareholder presentation, not get married," Marcus said, stepping back to examine his work. Marcus had been Ethan's roommate at MIT and had watched him build his fortune from a dorm room startup. Ethan forced a smile. "Just want everything to be perfect." "Charlotte's a lucky woman," Marcus said. "Though between you and me, I never thought I'd see the day Ethan Caldwell settled down." The name hung in the air. Charlotte Whitmore, daughter of investment mogul Richard Whitmore, graduate of Vassar, board member of 3 major charities. She was everything society expected for a man in Ethan's position: poised, connected, beautiful. Their engagement had been featured in Forbes and Town & Country. The wedding had been planned for 18 months. So why did Ethan feel like he was forgetting something important? 5 minutes, Mr. Caldwell. An assistant called from the doorway. Ethan took a deep breath. He thought about the past 6 months with Charlotte. The charity galas where she always knew exactly what to say. The business dinners where she charmed investors effortlessly. She fit into his world perfectly, maybe too perfectly. There were moments, small ones, where he'd catch her in whispered conversations with her father that would stop abruptly when he entered the room. Times when her smile seemed more like a performance than genuine emotion. 3 days ago, his CFO had flagged an unusual financial transfer. A payment from one of Charlotte's family trusts to an offshore account, processed the same week they'd announced the engagement. When Ethan had asked Charlotte about it, she'd laughed it off as her father's complex tax planning. But her eyes had flickered with something else. Worry? Guilt? "You're overthinking," Ethan muttered to himself. He'd built a billion-dollar company by trusting his instincts, but he'd also learned that sometimes anxiety was just anxiety. The church was a masterpiece of architecture, with soaring ceilings and stained glass windows that scattered rainbow light across marble floors. 300 guests filled the pews: tech executives, political figures, old money families who'd initially looked down on Ethan's new wealth, but now courted his influence. Camera crews from 2 major networks had been approved for coverage, focusing on Ethan's philanthropic work rather than just the spectacle. Ethan had always been proud of his foundation work. Caldwell Technologies donated millions to education programs, medical research, and community development. He'd personally funded scholarships for hundreds of students. Whatever unease he felt about his personal life, he knew his public work mattered. Charlotte stood at the opposite end of the church, a vision in ivory silk. Her auburn hair was swept into an elegant updo, her makeup flawless. She should have been smiling, but even from a distance, Ethan could see tension in her shoulders. Her father stood beside her, Richard Whitmore in his expensive suit, speaking quietly into her ear. She nodded, but her expression remained tight. The music began. The ceremony was starting. Across the city, in a neighborhood the wedding guests would never visit, 12-year-old Nia Brooks ran down cracked sidewalks with an envelope clutched against her chest. Her second-hand sneakers slapped against concrete as she dodged around a corner, her breath coming in gasps. "Please still be there," she whispered. Please. Nia had been planning this for 3 weeks, ever since the day she'd found the box hidden in her grandmother's closet. Inside had been photographs, hospital records, and documents she barely understood but knew were important. One photo in particular had made her hands shake. Her mother, younger and healthy, standing next to a man Nia had seen on billboards and news websites. Ethan Caldwell. Her grandmother had been sick for months, getting worse every week. The medical bills were crushing them. Nia had thought maybe if she could just reach this rich man who'd once known her mother, maybe he could help. But then she'd read the note tucked inside the envelope, written in her mother's handwriting. They lied to both of you. That's when Nia realized this was about more than money. This was about truth. A bus turned the corner, and Nia waved frantically. She'd been saving coins for weeks to afford this trip across town. The church address had been in every news article about the wedding. She had one chance to reach him. Back at the church, Ethan walked down the aisle. Faces turned toward him, smiling, expectant. He recognized board members, investors, politicians. People who saw this wedding as a merger of influence as much as a union of hearts. The thought made his stomach turn. Charlotte met his eyes as he reached the altar. For just a moment, he saw something raw there. Fear? Regret? Then her practiced smile returned. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, his voice echoing through the vast space. Ethan's mind wandered during the opening remarks. He found himself thinking about a woman he'd met years ago, back when Caldwell Technologies was just starting to take off. She'd worked in the community outreach division, had a brightness about her that cut through all the corporate politics. He'd approved emergency funding for her medical expenses when she'd gotten sick, made sure her job was protected. Then one day, she was just gone. HR had said she'd resigned, taken a settlement, moved on. He meant to follow up, but got caught in the whirlwind of the company's explosive growth. What was her name? Brooks. Sarah Brooks. If anyone has reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace, the minister intoned. It was an old-fashioned addition Charlotte's mother had insisted on. Everyone knew it was ceremonial. No one actually objected at weddings. The church doors burst open with a bang that echoed like a gunshot. Every head turned. A small figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, chest heaving, clearly having run a long distance. As she moved into the light, gasps rippled through the crowd. A young black girl in worn jeans and a faded jacket, completely out of place among the designer gowns and tailored suits. "Security," Richard Whitmore hissed. But the girl was already moving down the aisle, her eyes locked on Ethan with desperate intensity. 2 security guards moved to intercept her, but something in her expression made them hesitate. This wasn't some crazed fan or protester. This was a child, terrified and determined. "Please," Nia called out, her voice cracking. "Mr. Caldwell, please." Ethan stepped away from the altar without thinking. Charlotte grabbed his arm. "Ethan, don't," she whispered urgently. "Let security handle this." But he pulled free, moving toward the girl. Up close, he could see she'd been crying. Her hands trembled as she clutched a manila envelope. "What's wrong?" Ethan asked, kneeling to her level. "Are you hurt? You have to come now," Nia said, the words tumbling out. "Right now. There's no time. Sweetheart, I'm in the middle of—" "I know." Nia's eyes filled with tears. "I know it's your wedding. I know how important it is. But please, Mr. Caldwell, my grandmother is dying, and there's something you need to know. Something about my mother. Something they've been hiding from you." The murmurs from the guests grew louder. Camera flashes went off. Ethan could see Richard Whitmore moving down the aisle toward them, his face dark with anger. "Who's your mother?" Ethan asked gently. "Sarah Brooks. She worked for you years ago, and they lied to you about why she left. They lied about everything." The name hit Ethan like a physical blow. Sarah Brooks. He did remember her, vividly, now that he thought about it. Her laugh, her dedication to helping people, the way she believed in the Foundation's mission even when it was just a side project. "This is absurd," Richard Whitmore announced, reaching them. "Security, remove this child immediately." "Don't touch her," Ethan said, his voice cold. Richard's eyes narrowed. "Ethan, be reasonable. This is clearly some kind of scam." Poor child sent to disrupt your wedding, probably hoping for a payout. I've seen this sort of thing before. You know about my mother? Nia asked, looking at Richard with sudden recognition. You were there, in the photo. Richard's face went pale for just a second before he recovered. I have no idea what she's talking about. But Ethan had seen that flash of recognition. Something was wrong here. Very wrong. Nia thrust the envelope toward Ethan. Please, just look, and then come with me. My grandmother doesn't have much time, and she needs to tell you the truth before it's too late. Charlotte appeared at Ethan's shoulder, her voice tight. Ethan, our wedding. 300 guests. The media. You can't seriously be considering this. He looked at his bride, really looked at her, and saw in her eyes the same fear he'd glimpsed in her father's face. They knew something. Both of them. Ethan took the envelope. Inside was a photograph, yellowed with age. It showed Sarah Brooks, smiling and healthy, standing outside Caldwell Technologies' first office building. Beside her stood a younger Ethan, and on his other side, Richard Whitmore. Ethan didn't remember the photo being taken, but there it was. A document beneath showed hospital records, legal settlements with signatures he didn't recognize, and finally, a handwritten note. They lied to both of you. Ethan, Charlotte said, her voice breaking. Please, don't do this. He looked at Nia's frightened, hopeful face, looked at Charlotte's desperation, at Richard's barely concealed anger, at the 300 guests waiting for him to make a choice. I'm sorry, Ethan said quietly. He stood, still holding the envelope, and addressed the crowd. I apologize, but I need to postpone this ceremony. There's an emergency that requires my immediate attention. The church erupted in shocked whispers. Charlotte made a sound like a wounded animal. Richard's face turned purple with rage. You'll regret this, Richard hissed, low enough that only Ethan could hear. You have no idea what you're doing. Then maybe it's time I found out, Ethan replied. He turned to Nia. Show me where to go. The contrast between worlds hit Ethan the moment they left the church's marble steps. Nia led him to a bus stop where 3 other people waited, all looking at his tuxedo with expressions ranging from amusement to suspicion. The bus that arrived was nothing like the luxury vehicles Ethan had grown accustomed to. Plastic seats, advertisement panels, the smell of too many bodies in too small a space. Nia sank into a seat near the back, finally allowing herself to breathe. Ethan sat beside her, aware of every stare from other passengers. His phone had been vibrating nonstop since they'd left. He silenced it without looking. Thank you for coming, Nia said softly. I didn't think you actually would. Tell me what's happening, Ethan said, slowly, from the beginning. Nia clutched the envelope. My grandmother raised me since I was 6. That's when my mom died. Graham always said it was pneumonia, that she got sick real fast, and there was nothing anyone could do. But 3 weeks ago, I found this box hidden in Graham's closet. She pulled out more photos. Sarah Brooks at various ages, always with the same bright smile Ethan remembered. Sarah holding a baby, Nia, presumably. Sarah looking thinner, sicker, standing outside a hospital. There were all these papers I didn't really understand. Legal stuff, settlement agreements, medical records that didn't match what Graham told me. And this note from my mom. Nia's voice shook. It said she was trying to protect someone, that powerful people wanted to keep secrets buried, and that if anything happened to her, someone needed to know the truth. What truth? Ethan asked gently. I don't know all of it, but my grandmother does, and she's been getting sicker and sicker. The doctors say her heart is failing. We can't afford the medications anymore. I thought maybe if I could find you, you might help since you helped my mom once. Nia looked up at him with eyes too old for her age. But then I saw your wedding announcement, and I realized your fiancé's last name. Whitmore. The same name on a bunch of those legal papers. Ethan's blood went cold. Charlotte's family was involved with your mother? Her dad for sure. His signature is on everything. The bus lurched to a stop. Nia stood. This is us. They emerged into a neighborhood Ethan had probably driven past 100 times without really seeing. Cracked sidewalks, buildings with peeling paint, corner stores with barred windows. This was less than 5 miles from his estate, but it might as well have been a different planet. Nia led him up 3 flights of stairs in a building that smelled of mildew and cooking oil. The apartment door was unlocked. Inside, the furniture was old but clean, the space cramped but organized. Photographs covered one wall. Nia at various ages, Sarah Brooks in happier times, an elderly black woman who must be the grandmother. That woman lay on a worn couch now, her breathing labored, skin ashen. Her eyes opened when they entered, and she saw Ethan. Recognition flooded her face, followed by something complicated. Relief, anger, sadness all mixed together. "Ethan Caldwell," she whispered. "After all these years." "Mrs. Brooks," Ethan said, moving to kneel beside the couch. "I'm going to call an ambulance. You need medical attention." "Already called one," Nia said, "but it'll take a while. They're not fast to come here." Ethan pulled out his phone and made a different call. "This is Ethan Caldwell. I need a private medical team dispatched immediately." He gave the address, watching Mrs. Brooks' labored breathing with growing alarm. 10 minutes. Have them bring cardiac equipment." When he hung up, Mrs. Brooks was watching him with watery eyes. "Still throwing money at problems, I see." "I'm sorry," Ethan said, though he wasn't sure what he was apologizing for yet. "Your daughter, Sarah, she worked for me. I lost touch with her." "I should have. You should have known what they did to her," Mrs. Brooks interrupted. Her voice was weak but sharp. "What they took from her. From both of you. What are you talking about?" Mrs. Brooks looked at Nia. "Baby, in my bedroom closet, there's a shoebox on the top shelf. Bring it here." Nia disappeared and returned with a battered Nike shoebox. Inside were more documents, more photos, and a small jewelry box. Mrs. Brooks opened it with trembling fingers, revealing a simple gold locket. Sarah bought this when she found out she was pregnant. Put a picture inside. She opened the locket. One side showed baby Nia. The other showed Ethan, cut for what looked like a company newsletter. Ethan's world tilted. "I don't understand. My daughter worked in your foundation division 9 years ago. You were different then, hands-on, meeting with staff, involved in projects instead of just board meetings. Sarah fell in love with you, though she never told anyone at work. Said it was unprofessional." Ethan's mind raced back through memories. 9 years ago, he'd been 30, the company just starting its explosive growth phase. There had been someone, a connection he'd felt, but never acted on because of workplace ethics. Sarah, always Sarah, in the background of his memories, making him laugh during stressful times. "We never," Ethan started. "The company Christmas party," Mrs. Brooks said. 9 years ago this December. You both had too much to drink. She told me you were kind about it after, embarrassed, said it couldn't happen again because you were her boss. She agreed. Then 6 weeks later, she found out she was pregnant. The room spun. Ethan gripped the edge of the couch. "That's not possible. She would have told me." "She tried," Nia said quietly. "There's emails, letters. You never got them." Mrs. Brooks continued, each word clearly painful. "Sarah went to HR to request a transfer to a different division so she could tell you about the baby without the workplace complication. That's when Richard Whitmore got involved. He was consulting for your company on the expansion financing. Somehow, he found out about the pregnancy before Sarah could tell you. Why would Richard care about my personal life? Because even then, he was planning his daughter's future. Charlotte was 21, fresh out of college, being positioned to marry well. Whitmore saw you as a rising star worth investing in, but not with scandal attached. Not with a baby from a low-level employee." Ethan felt sick. What did he do? "He offered Sarah a choice," Mrs. Brooks said, her voice hardening. "A generous settlement to resign quietly and never contact you again, or he'd make sure she was fired, blacklisted from ever working in tech or nonprofit sectors again, and he'd tie her up in legal battles she could never afford. He said it was for your own good, that the scandal would destroy your company just as it was taking off, that you'd resent her and the baby for ruining your future. That's not his decision to make." Ethan stood, pacing the small room. "She should have told me anyway." "I would have." "What?" Mrs. Brooks challenged. "What would you have done? You were working 100-hour weeks. Your company was your entire life. Sarah loved you enough to believe maybe Whitmore was right. Maybe you would have seen her and the baby as burdens. So she took the settlement. Move back here with me, raised Nia quietly. Then why all this now? Ethan asked. Why not reach out in the last 9 years? Because Sarah got sick 6 years ago. Breast cancer. The settlement money helped with treatment at first, but it wasn't enough. She tried to contact you then, but Whitmore found out. He paid her more money to stay quiet. Told her if she ever contacted you, he'd make sure she lost custody of Nia, that the courts would see her as an extortionist. She was terrified, so she stayed silent and died, keeping her secret safe. Nia was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. Ethan wanted to comfort her, but felt paralyzed by the enormity of what he was hearing. A commotion outside announced the arrival of the medical team. Ethan had called in favors from the city's best cardiac unit. Within minutes, Mrs. Brooks was being assessed, stabilized, prepared for transport to a private hospital. We can't afford this, Mrs. Brooks protested weakly. It's covered, Ethan said. Everything, whatever you need. As the paramedics worked, Ethan stepped into the hallway with Nia. She leaned against the wall, looking exhausted and young and scared. Is it true? She asked. Are you really my father? I don't know, Ethan said honestly, but I'm going to find out. And if I am, Nia, I swear to you I never knew. I would never have abandoned you or your mother. She knew that, Nia said. Graham told me Mom always said you were a good person who got surrounded by sharks. She was trying to protect you from them. Ethan's phone buzzed again. Dozens of missed calls. Messages from Marcus, from Charlotte, from board members. One text from Richard Whitmore stood out. You're making a terrible mistake. Call me immediately. He blocked the number. The medical team emerged with Mrs. Brooks on a stretcher, oxygen mask in place but conscious. Ethan rode in the ambulance with them, Nia clutching his hand like a lifeline. As they pulled away from the building, he looked back at the neighborhood where his daughter, possibly his daughter, had been growing up while he lived in oblivious luxury. At the hospital, Mrs. Brooks was rushed into cardiac care. Ethan paced the waiting room, Nia sitting hunched in a chair, still wearing her worn jacket. Are you hungry? Ethan asked. When did you last eat? Nia shrugged. Had some cereal this morning. He ordered food delivered, watched her eat like she hadn't had a decent meal in days. Probably hadn't. While she ate, he made calls. First to his lawyer, then to a private investigator, then to his head of HR. He wanted every document related to Sarah Brooks, every communication, every settlement agreement. He wanted Richard Whitmore's involvement traced to its source. Marcus called. Ethan answered. What the hell is going on? Marcus demanded. The wedding is in chaos. Charlotte is devastated. The media is having a field day. Richard Whitmore is threatening lawsuits. Let him threaten, Ethan said. Did you know I might have a daughter? Silence. Then what? Ethan explained briefly. Marcus swore. 9 years ago, Marcus said slowly. I remember you were different after that Christmas party. Quieter. I asked if something happened, and you brushed me off. I thought it was just an embarrassing mistake between coworkers, Ethan said. I never imagined. Marcus, what if Whitmore has been manipulating me this entire time? The financing deal 9 years ago that saved the company, introducing me to Charlotte 3 years later, pushing for this merger of families. What if it was all calculated? That's paranoid thinking, Marcus said, but he sounded uncertain. Is it? Or am I finally seeing clearly? A doctor emerged. Mrs. Brooks was stable, but would need to stay for extensive treatment. Ethan authorized everything without hesitation. In the private room, Mrs. Brooks looked smaller under the hospital sheets, but more alert with proper medication and oxygen. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me. I should have been there from the beginning. Ethan pulled a chair close. You said Charlotte's family knows the truth. What else haven't you told me? Mrs. Brooks glanced at Nia, who'd fallen asleep in a chair by the window. Sarah kept records. Everything Whitmore did, she documented. She was gathering evidence, planning to go public if they ever came after Nia. But someone found out. The night she died, it wasn't just cancer. She'd been getting better, responding to treatment. Then suddenly she crashed. The doctors said it was complications, but Sarah told me the day before that she was being followed, that she'd received threats. Ethan's blood ran cold. You think she was killed? I think powerful people wanted her silent. And I think if they find out Nia brought you that envelope, they'll want her silent too. As if summoning demons by speaking of them, the hospital room door opened. Charlotte stood there, still in her wedding dress, makeup streaked with tears. Her eyes found Ethan, and something in her expression broke his heart despite everything. "I need to talk to you," she said. "Please. Alone." Charlotte stood in the hospital room doorway, still wearing her wedding dress. The ivory silk seemed out of place among the sterile white walls and medical equipment. Her makeup had run, leaving dark streaks down her cheeks, and her carefully styled hair was coming loose. She looked nothing like the composed socialite who'd stood at the altar hours earlier. Ethan glanced at Mrs. Brooks, who gave him a small nod. He stood, careful not to wake Nia, and followed Charlotte into the hallway. The hospital corridor was quiet this late in the evening, just the distant beep of monitors and soft footsteps of nurses making their rounds. "You left me standing at the altar," Charlotte said, her voice barely above a whisper, "in front of 300 people. The media is calling it the scandal of the year." "I know," Ethan said. "I'm sorry it happened that way." "Are you?" Charlotte's eyes flashed. "Because you don't look sorry. You look like you found something you've been searching for." The observation startled him with its accuracy. A 12-year-old girl showed up terrified and desperate. Her grandmother was dying. "What was I supposed to do?" "You were supposed to marry me." Charlotte's voice rose, then caught. She pressed a hand to her mouth, composing herself. "We had plans, Ethan. A future. I loved you." "Loved?" Past tense. Charlotte laughed bitterly. "You left me at the altar to chase after a child you'd never met, based on some envelope full of old papers. How am I supposed to feel?" "Your father knew that girl's mother," Ethan said carefully. "He was involved in paying her off years ago." "Did you know about that?" Something flickered across Charlotte's face. "Fear? Guilt? I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me." "Not now." Ethan stepped closer. "Charlotte, your father has been manipulating my life for years. If you knew anything about it, if you were part of it, I need you to tell me now." "Part of what?" Charlotte's voice cracked. "Ethan, I fell in love with you at that charity gala 3 years ago. You were funny and kind, and you actually cared about making the world better. My father didn't arrange that. He didn't make me feel the way I felt. But he encouraged the relationship. He encourages all my relationships with successful men," Charlotte said. "That's what fathers like Richard Whitmore do. They see their children as investments." She wrapped her arms around herself. "You think I don't know that? You think I haven't spent my entire life being the perfect daughter, the perfect asset to the family portfolio?" For the first time, Ethan saw past the polished exterior to something vulnerable underneath. "Then help me understand. What does your father have to hide?" "I don't know the details," Charlotte insisted. "I just know that whenever your name comes up at family dinners, he gets this look. Satisfied. Like things are going according to plan. And once, about a year ago, I overheard him on the phone saying something about old problems staying buried." She met Ethan's eyes. "I didn't ask questions. I've learned not to ask questions about my father's business." "That's not good enough anymore," Ethan said. "There's a woman who died under suspicious circumstances. A child who's been living in poverty while I had no idea she might be mine. Your father was involved in all of it. Might be yours." Charlotte seized on the word. "You don't even know for sure?" "Not yet. But I'm going to find out." Charlotte stared at him for a long moment. Then she reached up and removed her veil, letting it fall to the floor. "If you do this, if you go after my father, it'll destroy everything. His business, my family's reputation, probably your company too. The Whitmore investments are tangled up in half your major contracts." "I know, and you're going to do it anyway." "I have to." Charlotte nodded slowly, like she'd expected this answer. "Then I guess I never really knew you at all." She started to walk away, then turned back. "For what it's worth, I hope she is your daughter. I hope you get the family you're looking for, because you just lost the one you could have had with me." She disappeared down the corridor, leaving her veil on the floor like a discarded dream. Ethan returned to the hospital room. Nia was awake now, watching him with worried eyes. "Is she going to cause problems?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted, "but we have bigger concerns." He turned to Mrs. Brooks. "You said Sarah kept records. Where are they?" "Storage unit," Mrs. Brooks said. South Side, near the industrial district. Keys in that shoebox we brought. She coughed, the effort clearly painful. But Ethan, you need to understand something. My daughter died protecting those records. If you go digging them up, you'll be painting a target on your back. They already know I'm digging, Ethan said. The moment Nia walked into that church, this became inevitable. Over the next week, Ethan's world transformed in ways he never could have imagined. The media had a field day with the canceled wedding, spinning stories ranging from cold feet to secret affairs. His company's stock dipped 3% as investors worried about his stability. Board members called emergency meetings. Richard Whitmore's lawyers sent threatening letters about breach of contract and damage to the Whitmore family reputation. Ethan ignored all of it. He arranged for Mrs. Brooks to receive the best cardiac care available, setting her up in a private recovery suite. He moved Nia into a guest room at his estate, though she seemed terrified of touching anything in the mansion. He hired security for both of them after finding evidence that someone had broken into their apartment the day after the wedding. And he hired Marcus's cousin, a private investigator named Diana Chun, to start unraveling the web Richard Whitmore had spent years weaving. This is going to get ugly, Diana warned during their first meeting. She spread documents across Ethan's home office desk. Whitmore's been involved with your company since the beginning. The Series B funding that saved you from bankruptcy? His firm arranged it. The merger with Patterson Technologies 3 years ago? He brokered the deal. Half your board members have personal investments tied to Whitmore Holdings. So, if I go after him, they'll protect him to protect themselves, Ethan said. Exactly. And that's just the business side. Diana pulled up more files on her laptop. I've been looking into Sarah Brooks' death. The official cause was complications from metastatic breast cancer. But here's the thing. She'd been responding well to treatment. Her oncologist notes show surprise at the sudden decline. And the hospital where she died? It received a massive anonymous donation the same month, funneled through a Whitmore subsidiary. Ethan felt sick. You think they paid off the hospital? I think it's worth investigating. But I need to be clear, we're talking about accusations against one of the most powerful families in the state. If we're wrong, you're finished. If we're right, you'll wish we were wrong. Find the truth, Ethan said. Whatever it is. That evening, Ethan took Nia to the storage unit. It was in a rough neighborhood, the kind of place where chain-link fences topped with barbed wire seemed more decorative than protective. The unit itself was small, just 10 by 10 feet, filled with boxes that smelled of dust and old paper. Mom used to come here sometimes, Nia said quietly. I always wondered why. Graham said she was just storing old things, but I thought maybe she had secrets. Everyone has secrets, Ethan said, opening the first box. The question is whether they're worth keeping. They worked for hours, sorting through documents. There were contracts, emails printed and highlighted, photographs with notes written on the back. Sarah Brooks had been meticulous, building a case piece by piece. What emerged was a story of systematic manipulation. 9 years ago, Richard Whitmore had been consulting on Caldwell Technologies' expansion financing. He discovered through corporate gossip about Sarah's pregnancy before even Sarah had told anyone but HR. Instead of staying out of it, he'd seen an opportunity. Ethan was young, brilliant, and on the verge of either massive success or spectacular failure. A scandal about an inappropriate relationship with an employee could have tanked the company before it took off. So Whitmore had made the problem disappear. He'd pressured Sarah into signing a non-disclosure agreement, paid her off with enough money to seem generous, but not enough to be truly comfortable, and made sure she understood that any attempt to contact Ethan would result in legal and financial destruction. He'd even gone so far as to intercept emails she'd tried to send, working with Ethan's assistant at the time, a woman who'd mysteriously resigned 6 months later with a glowing reference and a suspiciously large severance package. He controlled everything, Nia said, reading over Ethan's shoulder. Every time Mom tried to reach you, he blocked it. Not just that, Ethan said, finding another folder. Look at this. 3 years ago, right before I met Charlotte, Whitmore was facing a liquidity crisis in his investment firm. He needed a major win. So he positioned his daughter to meet me at a charity gala he knew I'd attend. He'd done research on my interests, my schedule, even my taste in art. Charlotte wasn't randomly assigned to that event. She was placed there. Nia frowned. That's creepy. That's calculated. Ethan kept reading, his anger building with each document. He's been steering my life like I'm a chess piece. The business deals, the social connections, even my relationship. All of it designed to give him leverage and profit. At the bottom of one box, Ethan found a sealed envelope with his name on it in Sarah's handwriting. His hands shook as he opened it. The letter inside was dated 2 weeks before Sarah's death. Dear Ethan, it began. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and my daughter has finally found the courage I never had. I'm sorry for keeping Nia from you. I'm sorry for believing Richard Whitmore when he said you'd be better off not knowing. Mostly, I'm sorry I never got to see the man you'd become as a father, because I think you would have been wonderful at it. I'm writing this because I'm scared. Richard found out I've been keeping records of what he did. He sent people to my apartment. They didn't hurt me physically, but they made it clear that Nia's safety depends on my silence. I've moved these documents somewhere safe and told my mother where to find them if anything happens to me. I want you to know that what happened between us wasn't a mistake, even if it only happened once. You were kind and genuine, and you made me believe that good people could succeed in business. Nia has your eyes and your stubborn determination to fix everything. She's the best thing I've ever done. If you found these papers, it means Richard's manipulation has probably touched your life in ways you're only beginning to understand. Be careful. He doesn't just destroy people's careers. He destroys their lives. He's convinced himself he's doing the right thing, protecting investments and building empires. But he's a monster in a good suit. Protect our daughter. Love her the way I wish I'd let you love us both. And please, don't let my silence be for nothing. Shine a light on what he did. Make sure no one else gets buried the way he tried to bury me. With love, I was too scared to show you, Sarah. Ethan read the letter 3 times, tears blurring his vision. Nia sat beside him in the dusty storage unit, and he put his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, and they stayed like that for a long time, mourning the years they'd lost. We're going to make this right, Ethan promised. I swear to you, Nia, you won't get away with this. The DNA test results arrived on a Tuesday morning. Ethan had arranged for expedited processing through a private lab, and he sat in his home office with the envelope for 10 minutes before finding the courage to open it. Nia was at school. He'd enrolled her in a private academy near his estate, though she complained daily about feeling out of place among kids who'd never worried about where their next meal would come from. Marcus sat across from him, having driven over when Ethan called. You want me to read it? No, Ethan said. I need to do this. He tore open the envelope. The technical language filled most of the page, but the conclusion was clear. Probability of paternity 99.97%. Nia was his daughter. Ethan's hand shook. He'd known on some level, felt it in his bones since the moment she'd burst into the church. But seeing it confirmed in black and white made it real in a way nothing else had. Congratulations, Marcus said softly. You're a father. I've been a father for 12 years, Ethan said. I just didn't know it. The weight of lost time pressed down on him. Birthday parties he'd missed, school events he hadn't attended, nights when she'd gone to bed hungry while he'd dined at 5-star restaurants. How do I make up for that? You don't, Marcus said honestly. You can't change the past. You can only be there from now on. That afternoon, when Nia came home from school, Ethan was waiting in the living room. She dropped her new backpack by the door, still not comfortable, just leaving expensive things around, and looked at him nervously. You got the test results, she said. How did you know? You've got that look, like you're about to say something important. She twisted her hands together. So what did they say? Ethan held out the paper. Nia read it, her lips moving slightly as she worked through the technical language. When she understood, she looked up at him with eyes that suddenly seemed very young and very scared. So it's real, she whispered. You're really my dad. I'm really your dad. Nia stood frozen for a moment. Then she burst into tears. Not quiet, dignified crying, but the kind of sobbing that comes from a child who's been holding everything together for too long. Ethan crossed the room and pulled her into a hug, and she clung to him like she was drowning. I'm sorry, she kept saying. I'm sorry I ruined your wedding. I'm sorry I messed up your life. You didn't mess up anything, Ethan said firmly. You saved me from making a terrible mistake. You brought me the truth. That's the bravest thing anyone's ever done for me. They stayed like that until Nia's tears subsided. When she pulled back, she wiped her face with her sleeve, embarrassed. This is so weird. I've never had a dad before. And I've never been a dad before, Ethan admitted. So we'll figure out together. Deal. Deal. That evening, Ethan called his lawyer. I want to file for full custody of Nia Brooks. And I want charges pressed against Richard Whitmore for obstruction of justice, coercion, and anything else we can make stick. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Hayes, was quiet for a moment. Ethan, custody shouldn't be a problem since you're her biological father and her grandmother has already consented. But going after Whitmore? That's a different story. His lawyers will bury you in motions for years. And frankly, most of what he did might be legal, just immoral. What about the suspicious circumstances around Sarah Brooks' death? Suspicious isn't proof. You need evidence of actual wrongdoing, not just convenient timing and anonymous donations. Patricia paused. I'm not saying don't do this. I'm saying be prepared for a war. Whitmore has resources and connections you can't imagine. He'll come after your company, your reputation, everything you've built. Let him try, Ethan said. The war started faster than expected. 3 days after Ethan filed the custody papers, his company's board called an emergency meeting. He walked into the conference room to find 8 stern faces staring at him. Richard Whitmore sat at the far end of the table, calm and composed. Richard isn't a board member, Ethan said coldly. What's he doing here? I invited him, said Gerald Patterson. The board's chairman and former CEO of the company Caldwell Technologies had merged with. Given his substantial investment in our success, I felt he deserved to voice his concerns about recent events. Recent events, Ethan repeated. You mean me discovering I have a daughter? I mean you destroying your credibility, Richard said, his voice measured. Abandoning your wedding on live television to chase after a child you'd never met. Causing a media circus that's damaged both our families. Making wild accusations that threaten business relationships worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Wild accusations? You paid off my daughter's mother to keep her away from me. You manipulated my life for years for your own profit. I gave a young woman in a difficult situation a generous settlement, Richard corrected. I helped facilitate business deals that made you billions. If you want to twist those facts into some conspiracy theory, that's your prerogative. But this board has a fiduciary duty to shareholders, and your recent behavior suggests you're no longer capable of making rational decisions. Gerald cleared his throat. Ethan, we've called this meeting to discuss a temporary leave of absence, just until the personal issues are resolved and the media attention dies down. You're trying to remove me from my own company. We're trying to protect the company, Gerald said. Your company. We all want what's best for Caldwell Technologies. Ethan looked around the table. Some board members wouldn't meet his eyes. Others looked apologetic but resigned. Only Sandra Williams, his CFO, seemed angry on his behalf. You can't do this, Sandra said. Ethan founded this company. He owns 40% of the stock, which isn't a controlling interest, Richard pointed out. And the board has the authority to make executive decisions in crisis situations. This qualifies. Then I guess we know where everyone stands, Ethan said quietly. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket. You want me gone? Fine, but I'm not going quietly. I'll fight this removal, and while I'm at it, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly how Richard Whitmore operates. He walked out before anyone could respond. That night, Ethan sat in his home office, staring at financial reports and legal documents. The board's move had been calculated. They'd waited until after trading hours to make their announcement, minimizing stock impact. By morning, the business news would frame it as a responsible decision by concerned board members protecting shareholder interests. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Nia peeked in, wearing pajamas that still had the tags on them. She was uncomfortable with all the new clothes he'd bought her, preferring her old worn things. Can't sleep? Ethan asked. Heard you come home. You seemed upset. She came in and sat in the chair across from his desk. Is it bad? The company's board is trying to push me out. Your grandmother would say, I'm reaping what I sowed for trusting the wrong people. Gram says a lot of things, Nia said. But she also says sometimes you gotta lose everything to figure out what actually matters. She picked at the arm of the chair. Are you sorry? That I came to your wedding? That all this happened? Ethan looked at his daughter, and she was his daughter, DNA confirmed, sitting in his home where she belonged. No, he said honestly. I'm not sorry. Scared, maybe. Angry at myself for being blind for so long. But not sorry. Good, Nia said, because I'm not sorry either. Even if everything gets worse. It might get worse before it gets better. Then we'll deal with it. She stood up. Mom used to say that courage isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing the right thing anyway. So that's what we'll do. After she left, Ethan opened his laptop and started typing. If the board wanted a fight, he'd give them one. But he'd do it his way, with transparency. He drafted a statement telling his side of the story. About Nia, about Sarah, about Richard Whitmore's manipulation. He included documentation, keeping Sarah's more personal letters private, but showing the business connections and financial trails. He scheduled it to post to his personal blog at 8 a.m. when markets opened. Then he called Diana. I need everything you found on Whitmore. Every questionable deal, every suspicious connection. I'm going public with all of it. Ethan, once you do this, there's no going back. He'll destroy you if he can. He already tried to destroy me. Ethan said. He just did it slowly enough that I didn't notice. Now it's my turn. The next morning, Ethan's blog post went viral within an hour. Major news outlets picked it up by 9 a.m. By noon, it was the top trending topic on social media. The story had everything: billionaire drama, corporate corruption, a secret child, a powerful family exposed. Public opinion split sharply. Some saw Ethan as a victim fighting back against manipulation. Others viewed him as an unstable CEO making excuses for poor judgment. But everyone was talking, and the scrutiny fell hard on Richard Whitmore. Reporters dug into Whitmore's business history, finding patterns of aggressive tactics and questionable deals. Former business partners came forward with stories of intimidation and manipulation. The SEC announced they'd be reviewing several of Whitmore's investment firm's transactions. Charlotte released her own statement, brief but significant. I had no knowledge of my father's actions regarding Ethan Caldwell's personal life. I'm cooperating fully with all investigations. Some discoveries about the people we love are too painful to process publicly. That afternoon, Ethan received an unexpected visitor at his home. His security called to say Mrs. Brooks was at the gate, having checked herself out of the hospital against medical advice. Let her in, Ethan said. Mrs. Brooks looked fragile but determined, walking with a cane but refusing Ethan's offered arm. Nia ran to hug her grandmother, careful not to squeeze too hard. Gram, you're supposed to be resting. I've been resting for weeks, Mrs. Brooks said. I saw the news. Saw what you did, Ethan. She looked at him with something like approval. Sarah would be proud. And terrified. Mostly terrified. Did I make a mistake going public? Ethan asked. You made the only choice a parent could make, Mrs. Brooks said. You chose your daughter over your comfortable life. That's what Sarah always wanted you to have the chance to do. She settled into a chair with a wince. But you need to understand, Richard Whitmore isn't done. Men like him don't just accept defeat. They escalate. Let him escalate. I'm not backing down. Good, Mrs. Brooks said, because I've been holding something back. Something Sarah made me promise not to reveal unless you prove yourself worthy of the truth. She reached in her purse and pulled out a flash drive. Sarah didn't just document Richard's actions against her. She documented everything. Fraud, bribery, insider trading. She was a bookkeeper at heart, and she had access to information she wasn't supposed to see when she worked in your foundation division. That foundation processed donations that came through Whitmore's firm, and Sarah noticed irregularities. Money laundering disguised as charitable giving. She copied files before she left, thinking she might need leverage someday. Ethan stared at the flash drive. This could bring down his entire operation. It could also get people killed, Mrs. Brooks said bluntly. Sarah thought she was safe keeping these as insurance. She was wrong. You need to decide if you're willing to risk everything, including Nia's safety, to use this. The authorities should have this, Ethan said. It's evidence of crimes. The authorities can be bought, Mrs. Brooks countered, or delayed, or compromised. You're a smart man, Ethan. You know how the world works. Ethan looked at Nia, who was listening to everything with wide eyes. She was 12 years old and already understood corruption better than most adults. That wasn't fair. None of this was fair. But Mrs. Brooks was right about one thing. He was a parent now. Everything he did affected Nia's life, her safety, her future. I need to think about this, Ethan said. Don't think too long, Mrs. Brooks warned. Richard knows Sarah kept records. He's probably been searching for them for years. Once he realizes you might have them, he'll move fast. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He stood in Nia's doorway, watching her breathe in the dim light from the hallway. She'd fallen asleep with a book on her chest, something about space exploration. She wanted to be an astronaut, she'd told him. She wanted to go somewhere no one had ever been before. He wanted to give her that chance. He wanted to give her the safe, stable childhood her mother had been denied the resources to provide. He wanted to make up for 12 years of absence. But to do that, he had to finish what Sarah had started. He had to make sure Richard Whitmore couldn't hurt anyone else. Ethan went downstairs to his office and called Patricia Hayes. I'm going to need a criminal defense attorney in addition to a corporate lawyer. And someone who specializes in witness protection. Ethan, what are you about to do? Whatever it takes, he said. Whatever it takes to protect my daughter. The flash drive sat on his desk, small and innocuous. Inside it were secrets that could topple an empire. Outside, in the darkness beyond his estate's gates, he could see a car that hadn't been there before. Watching, waiting. Mrs. Brooks had been right. Richard Whitmore wasn't done. The real battle was just beginning. And somewhere in the house, his daughter slept, trusting him to keep her safe, trusting him to make the right choices. Ethan picked up the flash drive and locked it in his safe. Not yet, but soon, when he had all the pieces in place to make sure that revealing the truth wouldn't just start a war, it would end one. For now, he had a daughter to protect and a company to fight for. The rest could wait until morning. But morning was coming fast, and with it, the moment of decision he couldn't avoid forever. The surveillance car disappeared by morning, but Ethan knew that didn't mean the threat had gone away. It meant whoever was watching had gotten what they needed, confirmation that he was home, that Nia was with him, that they were predictable in their routines. He doubled security at the estate and hired a former Secret Service agent to coordinate protection. Nia noticed immediately. There are more guards, she said over breakfast, pushing scrambled eggs around her plate. She still wasn't used to having food she didn't want. Just being careful, Ethan said. Because of the flash drive Graham gave you. It wasn't a question. Nia had inherited her mother's sharp mind and her grandmother's ability to see through evasions. Because I'm not taking chances with your safety. Mom kept those files for years and nothing happened to her, Nia pointed out. It was only when she tried to do something with them that things went bad. The observation chilled Ethan because it was exactly right. Sarah had been safe as long as the evidence stayed hidden. The moment she'd become a threat, she'd been eliminated. Now Ethan had the same information, and Richard Whitmore knew it. His phone buzzed. Diana's name appeared on the screen. I've got something, she said without preamble. Can you meet me? Somewhere public. They met at a busy coffee shop downtown, the kind of place where conversations disappeared into background noise. Diana looked like she hadn't slept, her usually neat appearance rumpled. I've been tracking Richard's movements since her blog post went viral, she said, sliding a folder across the table. He's been busy, very busy, meeting with lawyers, calling in favors, consolidating assets. But here's the interesting part. He also met with someone from the district attorney's office. Ethan's stomach dropped. He's trying to get ahead of any criminal investigation, probably offering cooperation on something bigger in exchange for immunity on the smaller stuff. It's a smart play if he knows you have evidence against him. Diana leaned forward. Ethan, I think Richard knows about that flash drive, or at least suspects you have something damaging. How would he know? Your mother-in-law who wasn't checked herself out of a hospital where she'd been for a week. That hospital is partially funded by Whitmore charitable donations. It wouldn't be hard for him to have someone there keeping track of her, especially after your very public split from his daughter. Ethan cursed under his breath. He'd been so focused on protecting Nia that he hadn't considered Mrs. Brooks might lead Richard right to the evidence. "There's more," Diana said. "I found something in Sarah's employment records. Something that doesn't make sense." She pulled out a document. When Sarah was hired by Caldwell Technologies 9 years ago, her background check was processed through a firm that Richard's investment company owned at the time. So he knew about her from the very beginning. It's possible he even arranged for her to get the job. Think about it. You needed someone in community outreach. She had perfect credentials, and she just happened to end up working closely with you during a critical growth phase. Diana's expression was grim. What if the whole thing was a setup from the start? The idea made Ethan feel sick. Why would he do that? I don't know yet, but I will find out. Diana closed the folder. In the meantime, whatever's on that flash drive, you need to decide what you're doing with it. Soon, because Richard is playing chess while you're still figuring out the rules. That afternoon, Ethan sat in his home office with a flash drive plugged into an encrypted laptop, reviewing files Sarah had compiled years ago. She'd been meticulous, organizing everything by date and category. What he found made his earlier anger seem like a minor irritation. Richard Whitmore hadn't just manipulated Ethan's personal life. He'd been using Caldwell Technologies as a vehicle for money laundering for nearly a decade. Donations to the company's charitable foundation came from shell corporations tied to offshore accounts. The money was cleaned through grants to legitimate organizations, with a percentage kickback to Whitmore's firms through consulting fees and administrative costs. Sarah had documented dozens of transactions, cross-referenced bank statements, traced funds through multiple layers of corporate structure. She'd essentially built a prosecutor's dream case, then hidden it away because she was too terrified to use it. There were also emails, conversations between Richard and various business partners discussing Ethan like he was a commodity to be managed. One email from 8 years ago made Ethan's blood boil. Caldwell is brilliant but naive. Perfect combination. He'll build the empire and never notice we're taking our cut. The key is keeping him focused on the tech and away from the money. His new girlfriend is becoming a liability, too smart, asking too many questions. I'll handle it. The girlfriend referenced was Sarah. 2 weeks after that email, she'd been paid off and removed from the company. Another file contained something even more disturbing. A medical report from a private investigator Richard had hired to follow Sarah during her cancer treatment. Detailed notes about her doctor visits, her medication regimen, her declining health. And at the bottom, a handwritten note. Natural causes. No investigation warranted. Problem resolved. Ethan stared at those words for a long time. Problem resolved. That's all Sarah had been to Richard Whitmore. A problem to be resolved. He was so absorbed in the files that he didn't hear Nia come in until she spoke. Is that the stuff about Mom? Ethan quickly closed the laptop. You shouldn't be seeing this. Why not? It's about my mother. I have a right to know. Nia's voice was steady, but her eyes were fierce. You keep trying to protect me from the truth, but I've been living with pieces of it my whole life. I'm not a little kid who needs to be shielded. You're 12 years old. I'm 12 years old, and I've spent the last 6 years watching my mom die, while my grandmother worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. I've stolen food from grocery stores because we were hungry. I've lied to teachers about why I didn't have school supplies. Don't tell me I can't handle the truth about what happened to my family. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. He'd known intellectually that Nia had grown up poor, but hearing the specifics made it real in a way nothing else had. While he'd been attending galas and closing billion-dollar deals, his daughter had been stealing food to survive. You're right, he said quietly. I am sorry. What do you want to know? Nia sat down across from him. Did he kill her? Richard Whitmore. Did he kill my mom? I don't know for certain, but I think he created conditions that led to her death. I think he made sure she couldn't get the care she needed when she needed it most. Ethan reopened the laptop and showed Nia the investigator's report, the medical notes, the cold assessment of Sarah as a problem to be resolved. Nia read it all, her expression hardening with each line. When she finished, she looked up at Ethan with eyes that seemed far too old. We have to destroy him, she said simply. Not just stop him or expose him. Destroy him completely so he can never hurt anyone else. Nia, he took my mother from me. He took 12 years of having a father from both of us. He's still trying to take everything you built. And if we don't stop him, he'll keep doing it to other people. She stood up, her small frame somehow seeming larger. Mom kept these files because she believed in justice. So let's give her justice. That evening, Ethan made 2 calls. The first was to the FBI's white-collar crime division, requesting a meeting. The second was to his lawyer, Patricia Hayes. I'm turning over evidence of money laundering and fraud, he told Patricia. Extensive documentation spanning nearly a decade. It implicates Richard Whitmore and possibly others in my company's board. Ethan, if board members are implicated, this could collapse Caldwell Technologies entirely. Then it collapses. I'd rather have no company than one built on crime. That's very noble, Patricia said dryly. But think about the thousands of employees who will lose their jobs, the investors who will lose money, your own financial security. I'm thinking about them. If this comes out later, if someone else exposes it, the damage will be worse. At least this way, we control the narrative. Patricia sighed. I'll set up the FBI meeting. But Ethan, once you do this, you're at their mercy. They might decide you were complicit. They could charge you as part of the conspiracy. I'll take that risk. 2 days later, Ethan sat in a conference room at the FBI field office with Patricia beside him and 3 federal agents across the table. The lead agent, a woman named Rebecca Stone, reviewed the flash drive's contents with an expression that gave nothing away. This is extensive, she finally said. How did you obtain this information? Ethan explained about Sarah, about her role in the foundation, about her meticulous documentation. He left out some of the more personal details, focusing on the financial crimes. Ms. Brooks is deceased, Agent Stone noted. That makes her testimony unavailable. Defense attorneys will argue this evidence was manufactured, that she's a convenient scapegoat who can't defend herself. The transactions are real, Ethan said. The bank records, the shell corporations, the money trails. That can all be verified independently. It can, and it will be. But I need you to understand something, Mr. Caldwell. Agent Stone leaned forward. An investigation of this magnitude will take months, possibly years. During that time, you'll be under scrutiny too. Your company, your finances, your personal life. Everything will be examined. And if we find evidence you knew about any of this, you'll face charges. Understand, do you? Because I've seen cases like this before. The person who turns over the evidence thinks they're the hero. Then we start digging and find out they weren't as innocent as they claimed. They knew, or they should have known, or they benefited from willful ignorance. I didn't know, Ethan said firmly. I was focused on building technology and helping people. I trusted the wrong advisors. That was naive, maybe criminally naive, but it wasn't intentional. Agent Stone studied him for a long moment. We'll be in touch. Don't leave the state. Don't discuss this investigation with anyone except your lawyer. And Mr. Caldwell, if Richard Whitmore contacts you, record everything. The investigation hit the news within 48 hours. Someone at the FBI leaked to the press, and suddenly Federal White-Collar Crime Task Force and Richard Whitmore were trending topics on every news platform. The story had everything: corporate corruption, charitable fraud, a powerful family's fall from grace. Richard released a statement denying all accusations and accusing Ethan of fabricating evidence out of revenge for personal grievances. His lawyers filed a defamation suit within hours. Charlotte, however, did something unexpected. She scheduled a press conference. Ethan watched it live from his office, Nia sitting beside him. Charlotte stood at a podium outside her family's estate, wearing a simple navy suit, her hair pulled back. She looked tired and older than her years. I've spent my entire life being Richard Whitmore's daughter, she began. That meant something in social circles. It opened doors. It created opportunities. It also meant living with secrets I didn't fully understand, but chose not to question. She paused, composing herself. When my wedding was interrupted, I was angry, humiliated. I blamed Ethan Caldwell for making a private matter public. But over the past weeks, I've learned things about my father that I can no longer ignore. Things I should have questioned years ago. Charlotte pulled out a folder. These are financial records from my family's trusts. Transactions I never authorized but that were made in my name. Donations to charities that don't seem to exist. Consulting fees paid to companies I've never heard of. She looked directly at the camera. I'm turning these over to federal investigators. I'm also offering to testify about conversations I overheard, business meetings I attended, and instructions my father gave me that I now realize were part of a larger pattern of fraud. The press erupted with questions. Charlotte ignored them all. Ethan Caldwell didn't ruin my wedding. He saved me from becoming an accomplice to my father's crimes. And to Nia Brooks, if you're watching, I'm sorry for how my family treated your mother. I'm sorry for everything you've lost. You deserve better. You both did. She walked away from the podium without taking questions, leaving reporters shouting after her. Nia stared at the screen. She didn't have to do that. No, Ethan agreed. She didn't. Do you think you'll get back together? The question surprised him. Why would you ask that? Nia shrugged. She seems sad, and you seem sad. And maybe if her dad goes to jail, she won't be part of the bad stuff anymore. It doesn't work that way, kiddo. Too much has happened. But you loved her. Before all this. Ethan thought about that. Had he loved Charlotte? Or had he loved the idea of Charlotte? The perfect partner who fits seamlessly into his world? I thought I did. But I don't think I really knew her. Just like she didn't really know me. That's sad, Nia said. It is. But sometimes sad things happen, so better things can happen later. Like you finding out about me? Exactly like that. Ethan put his arm around her shoulders. Best thing that ever happened to me, even though it came from something terrible. Mrs. Brooks was released from the hospital the following week with a much better prognosis. Proper medication and treatment had stabilized her condition significantly. Ethan arranged for her to move into a guest house on his estate, close enough to Nia, but with her own space and dignity. You don't have to do all this, Mrs. Brooks said as movers brought in her furniture, a mix of her old things and new pieces Ethan had bought. Yes, I do, Ethan said. You raised my daughter when I couldn't. You protected her and loved her and kept her safe. There's no amount of gratitude that covers that. Mrs. Brooks sat in her new living room, tears running down her weathered face. Sarah would be so happy to see this, to see Nia with her father, to see her in a safe place. I wish I could have known Sarah better, Ethan said. Really known her, not just as an employee. She was special, saw the good in people even when they didn't deserve it. Mrs. Brooks looked at him directly. She saw it in you. That's why she kept those records instead of destroying them. She believed someday you'd be strong enough to use them right. Over the next weeks, the investigation expanded. Federal agents executed search warrants on Richard's offices, his homes, his investment firm. More people came forward with stories of intimidation and manipulation. Former employees, business partners, even a few Whitmore family members who'd been cut off years ago for asking too many questions. The board of Caldwell Technologies held another emergency meeting. This time, Gerald Patterson led the discussion with a very different tone. Ethan, we owe you an apology, Gerald said. The evidence of Richard's manipulation has made it clear that his influence on this board was inappropriate. Several members have resigned. We'd like to reinstate you as CEO with full authority. Ethan looked around the table. Sandra Williams was still there, loyal as always. But 3 seats were empty. Board members who'd resigned rather than face scrutiny. 2 new faces have been added. Directors he'd nominated months ago, but Richard had blocked. I appreciate that, Ethan said. But I have conditions. Full transparency audit of all company finances. Independent ethics review. And any board member who received personal benefits from Richard's schemes needs to resign immediately, or I'll make sure their involvement becomes public. Another board member shifted uncomfortably. That seems punitive. It's called accountability, Ethan said coldly. You all sided with Richard against me when I was trying to protect my daughter and uncover the truth. You chose profit over ethics. So yes, there will be consequences. Take them or I walk away and start a new company that isn't tainted by this mess. They took them. By the end of the meeting, 2 more board members had resigned. The remaining directors approved every reform Ethan proposed. Walking out of the building, Sandra caught up with him. "You've changed," she said. "You used to avoid confrontation. I used to think being nice was the same as being good." Ethan replied, "I was wrong. Sometimes being good means being tough." At home that evening, Ethan found Nia in the library, surrounded by books about her mother's work in nonprofit management. She was taking notes, her handwriting careful and precise. "What are you working on?" Ethan asked. "A memorial," Nia said. "For Mom. I want to start a foundation in her name. Something that helps other single mothers who are trying to protect their kids from powerful people." She looked up at him. "Is that stupid?" "That's the best idea I've heard in years." Ethan sat beside her. "We'll do it together. The Sarah Brooks Memorial Foundation. We'll fund legal aid, medical assistance, housing support, everything your mom needed but couldn't access." Nia's eyes filled with tears. "Really? Really? In fact, I'll assign some of our best people to help you develop the mission statement and programs." He pulled out his phone and started making notes. "We could launch it within 6 months if we move fast." "Thank you," Nia whispered. "Thank you for caring about her, even though she's gone." "I'll always care about her," Ethan said. "She gave me you. That's the greatest gift anyone's ever given me." They worked late into the evening, planning the foundation, talking about Sarah's vision for helping communities. Mrs. Brooks joined them, sharing stories about her daughter's early activism, her passion for justice, her fierce protection of those she loved. For the first time since the wedding interruption, Ethan felt something like peace. Not happiness exactly, too much damage had been done for that. But purpose, direction, a sense that maybe Sarah's death hadn't been meaningless after all. 3 weeks later, Ethan received a call from Agent Stone. "We're moving forward with charges against Richard Whitmore. Multiple counts of fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. His trial will probably start in about 6 months. What about charges against me? We found no evidence you knew about the illegal activity. You're clear." Agent Stone paused. "For what it's worth, Mr. Caldwell, what you did took courage. Most people in your position would have buried this to protect their company. Most people in my position don't have a 12-year-old daughter reminding them what actually matters." That evening, Ethan took Nia out for dinner at a small restaurant she'd chosen. Not fancy, but the kind of place where food tasted like love and effort. Over burgers and fries, he told her about the call from Agent Stone. "So it's really over?" Nia asked. "The investigation part is. The trial will take time, and Richard's lawyers will drag it out as long as possible. But yes, the worst is over." Nia nodded slowly. "Does it feel like winning?" "Honestly, it feels like surviving." Ethan took a sip of water. "But surviving is enough for now." "Mom would say surviving is how you start living," Nia said. That's what she told Graham when they were struggling. "Every day you survive is a day you get to try again tomorrow." Your mom was very wise. "Yeah," Nia said softly. She was. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then Nia spoke again, her voice hesitant. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything. Do you wish things were different? Like, do you wish you'd married Charlotte and never found out about me? Because your life would be easier." Ethan put down his burger and looked directly at his daughter. "Nia, listen to me. My life was easier before, but it wasn't better. It wasn't real. I was sleepwalking through a version of success that someone else designed for me. You woke me up. You brought me truth, even though it was painful. I will never regret that. Even though you lost your company for a while, I got the company back. And I found something more important. I found you." He reached across the table and took her hand. "There is nothing in this world I value more than being your father. Nothing. Do you understand?" Nia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand." They finished dinner and drove home through the city lights. Nia fell asleep in the passenger seat, her head against the window. Ethan looked over at her, this fierce, brilliant, damaged, beautiful child who'd save his life by interrupting it. At home, he carried her inside and tucked her in a bed, something he'd missed doing for 12 years. She stirred but didn't wake, just mumbled something about astronauts and stars. Ethan stood in her doorway for a long time, watching her sleep. Tomorrow there would be more battles to fight. Richard's lawyers, media scrutiny, rebuilding his company's reputation. But tonight, his daughter was safe and loved and home. That was enough. That was everything. 6 months passed like a storm, slowly dissipating. The media frenzy around Richard Whitmore's indictment had been intense at first, with camera crews camping outside courthouses and reporters analyzing every document filing. But as the legal process ground forward with its characteristic slowness, public attention began to drift to newer scandals. Ethan used the relative quiet to rebuild. Caldwell Technologies underwent a complete restructuring, bringing in ethics consultants and implementing transparency measures that became industry models. The company's stock had initially dropped 15% when the scandal broke, but strong quarterly earnings and the departure of corrupt board members had restored investor confidence. They were back within 2 points of their pre-scandal value. More importantly, Ethan had restructured his own priorities. He now left the office by 5 p.m. every day to have dinner with Nia. He attended her school events, helped with homework, learned the names of her friends. He was learning what it meant to be present, not just provider. Nia had changed too. She'd grown 3 inches and gained weight, her face filling out from the gaunt look she'd had when they first met. She smiled more easily now, though shadows still crossed her expression when she thought no one was watching. Therapy was helping, both individual sessions and family counseling with Ethan. They were learning to be a family together. The morning of Richard's trial, Ethan woke early. Nia was already up, sitting at the kitchen table in her school uniform, staring at a bowl of cereal. "You don't have to go today," Ethan said gently. "I can handle it." "I want to be there," Nia said. "I need to see it. It's going to be hard. His lawyers will try to make your mom look bad. They'll say she was an extortionist, a liar, whatever they think will create doubt. Let them try." Nia's jaw set in that stubborn way that reminded Ethan so much of himself. "I know who my mom was." "So do you?" "So does Graham. They can't change that." Mrs. Brooks joined them, moving more easily now with proper medication and physical therapy. "The child is right. We face this together, as a family." The courthouse was packed. Media had returned in force for the trial's opening day, and protesters lined the steps, some supporting Richard, claiming he was a victim of a vindictive ex-son-in-law, others demanding accountability for white-collar criminals who usually escaped consequences. Inside, the courtroom was all dark wood and formal ceremony. Richard sat at the defense table in an expensive suit, looking smaller, somehow, than Ethan remembered. His legal team surrounded him. 5 attorneys in total, the kind of overwhelming force only extreme wealth could afford. Charlotte sat in the gallery on the prosecution's side, making her allegiances clear. When she saw Ethan, she gave a small nod. He nodded back. They'd spoken a few times in the past months, awkward conversations that danced around everything that had happened. She was rebuilding her life separately from her father's shadow, working with a different charity now, and living in a modest apartment instead of the family estate. It was brave in its own way. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Jennifer Martinez, laid out the case methodically. She presented the financial records Sarah had compiled, showed the money trails through shell corporations, demonstrated how Richard had used Caldwell Technologies' charitable foundation as a vehicle for laundering money from questionable sources. Each transaction was explained in detail, building a picture of systematic fraud spanning years. Richard's lead attorney, an older man named Harrison Beck, countered by attacking Sarah's credibility. The deceased Ms. Brooks was a disgruntled former employee with an axe to grind, he argued. These so-called documents could have been manufactured or manipulated. We only have her word, and she conveniently isn't here to be cross-examined. Ethan's hands clenched. Beside him, Nia stiffened. But Jennifer was ready. The defense would have you believe that Sarah Brooks, a single mother working multiple jobs, somehow had the expertise and resources to fabricate years of financial records, complete with authentic bank statements, corporate filings, and email records that have been independently verified by forensic accountants. That strains credulity. She called her first witness, a forensic accountant who testified about tracing the funds, confirming every transaction Sarah had documented was real and verifiable. The defense tried to poke holes, suggesting the money movements could have innocent explanations, but the accountant was unshakable. The trial stretched over weeks. More witnesses testified. Former Whitmore employees who described a culture of intimidation. Business partners who'd been pressured into questionable deals. Even a former assistant who broke down while describing being ordered to intercept communications meant for Ethan. Charlotte testified on day 12. She walked to the stand with her head high, refusing to look at her father. Ms. Whitmore, Jennifer began gently. Can you describe your father's reaction when he learned about Sarah Brooks' pregnancy 9 years ago? He was furious, Charlotte said, her voice steady. I overheard him on the phone saying she was going to ruin everything, that he'd spent too much time and money positioning Ethan Caldwell to let some nobody destroy it. She paused. At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. I thought he was just being protective of his business interests. And when did you realize it was more than that? When I saw the documents Ethan provided to investigators. When I went through my family's financial records and found payments I'd never authorized, accounts I'd never opened. Charlotte's voice wavered slightly. When I realized my entire life had been choreographed by someone who saw people as chess pieces. Harrison Beck cross-examined aggressively. Isn't it true, Ms. Whitmore, that you're testifying against your father because you're angry about your canceled wedding? That this is revenge masquerading as justice? No, Charlotte said firmly. I'm testifying because I finally understand that my comfort came at other people's expense. Sarah Brooks died. Her daughter grew up in poverty. Ethan was manipulated for years. Those are facts, not revenge. But you loved your father once, didn't you? Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. I loved who I thought he was, not who he actually is. The prosecution's final witness was Mrs. Brooks. She walked to the stand slowly, using her cane, and took the oath with a steady voice. Jennifer approached carefully. Mrs. Brooks, can you tell the court about your daughter's last days? Mrs. Brooks looked directly at Richard as she spoke. My Sarah was getting better. Her doctor said the treatment was working. Then she told me she'd been followed, that someone broke into her apartment, that she'd received threatening phone calls. Her voice hardened. 2 days later, she was dead. The doctors said complications, but Sarah knew. She told me if anything happened, it wasn't an accident. Objection, Harrison called. Hearsay and speculation. Sustained, the judge said. The jury will disregard the witness's characterization of intent. But the damage was done. The jury had heard the implication, and doubt was a powerful thing. Harrison tried to discredit Mrs. Brooks during cross-examination, suggesting grief had distorted her memories, that she was financially dependent on Ethan now and had motivation to support his narrative. But Mrs. Brooks didn't break. My daughter documented facts, she said simply. I'm just making sure people hear them. During a court recess, Ethan found Nia in the hallway, sitting on a bench with tears streaming down her face. Hey, he said, sitting beside her. What's wrong? They keep talking about Mom like she was just some problem to be solved, Nia said. Like she wasn't a person who laughed and cooked terrible spaghetti and sang off-key in the shower. They're making her into a story instead of a human being. Ethan pulled her close. That's what courts do. They reduce lives to evidence and testimony. But we know who she was. That's what matters. I wish she was here to defend herself. She is defending herself. Through those documents, through Graham's testimony, through you being brave enough to walk into that church 6 months ago. Ethan tilted Nia's chin up so she met his eyes. Your mom will be so proud of you. You think. I know. The trial concluded after 6 weeks. Both sides gave closing arguments that tried to distill months of evidence into clear narratives. Jennifer painted Richard as a predator who'd built an empire on manipulation and fraud. Harrison portrayed him as a brilliant investor caught in the crossfire of a bitter personal dispute. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Ethan paced his living room, unable to focus on anything else. Nia did homework with unusual dedication, throwing herself into algebra problems as a distraction. Mrs. Brooks watched old movies, claiming she'd seen this all before and knew how it ended. When the call came that the jury had reached a verdict, they rushed back to the courthouse. The courtroom was silent as the jury foreman stood. Richard stared straight ahead, his expression carefully neutral. On the count of money laundering in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. Ethan's breath caught. Beside him, Nia grabbed his hand. On the count of fraud in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. More counts followed. Guide froth, obstruction of justice. Witness tampering, guilty, guilty, guilty. Richard's face remained impassive, but his hands shook slightly. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later, remanding Richard to custody immediately. As marshals approached to take him away, Richard looked across the courtroom at Charlotte. She held his gaze for a moment, then looked away. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Ethan read a prepared statement while Nia stood beside him. Justice has been served, but it doesn't bring back Sarah Brooks. It doesn't give back the years we lost. What it does is send a message that wealth and power don't place you above the law. He looked at the cameras. Sarah Brooks was a hero who documented these crimes at great personal risk. The foundation being established in her name will continue her work of protecting vulnerable people from powerful predators. Later, Nia asked the question Ethan had been expecting. Do you feel happy that he was found guilty? I feel relieved, Ethan said, but not happy. Too much was lost for happiness. Yeah, Nia agreed quietly. Me too. Richard Whitmore was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for the first 10. The judge called his actions a betrayal of every principle of ethical business conduct and noted that his lack of remorse was deeply troubling. The Whitmore business empire collapsed rapidly after the sentencing. Investors pulled out, partners dissolved relationships, and properties were liquidated to pay restitution. Within 6 months, the family name that had once opened doors became one that closed them. Charlotte handled the dissolution of her father's affairs with quiet dignity. She sold the family estate, settled victim claims, and donated remaining assets to charities that actually helped people rather than laundering money. She even reached out to Mrs. Brooks to personally apologize, though she wasn't responsible for her father's actions. She's trying, Mrs. Brooks told Ethan after the meeting. Can't fault someone for trying to be better than they were raised to be. Caldwell Technologies thrived. The ethics reforms Ethan implemented became case studies at business schools. His honest handling of the crisis earned respect from investors and employees alike. The company's reputation shifted from tech giant to ethical leader, and recruitment soared as talented people wanted to work for a company that prioritized values over profit. But Ethan's proudest achievement wasn't professional. It was the Sarah Brooks Memorial Foundation, which launched 9 months after that interrupted wedding. The foundation's opening gala was held in a renovated community center in the neighborhood where Nia had grown up. Instead of the usual society ballroom affair, Ethan insisted on hosting it where it would actually matter. 300 people attended, business leaders writing checks alongside community members who'd benefited from the foundation's first programs. Nia spoke at the podium, wearing a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back in a style that reminded Ethan achingly of Sarah. My mom believed in justice, Nia said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. Not the kind that happens in courtrooms, though that matters too. She believed in the justice of giving people fair chances, of making sure that being poor doesn't mean being powerless, of protecting families from people who think money makes them untouchable. She looked at the crowd. This foundation provides legal aid to parents fighting custody battles against wealthy opponents. It funds medical care for families who can't afford treatment. It offers housing assistance and job training and childcare and all the things my mom needed but couldn't access. Her voice strengthened. And it makes sure that when people with power try to silence people without it, there's someone standing up to say no. The applause was thunderous. Ethan watched his daughter own that stage, so poised and purposeful, and felt his heart might burst with pride. Later, Charlotte approached him at the reception. They'd talked occasionally over the past year, but always formally, carefully. Tonight she seemed different, lighter somehow. That was beautiful, Charlotte said. What you're doing here. What Nia said. She's remarkable, Ethan agreed. Takes after her mother. She takes after both her parents. Charlotte smiled slightly. You've changed too, you know. You seem more real now. More present. I had to lose everything I thought mattered to figure out what actually does. They stood in comfortable silence, watching Nia laugh with a group of teenagers from the neighborhood who'd been hired as foundation interns. Do you think we could have worked? Charlotte asked quietly. If circumstances had been different. Ethan considered the question honestly. I don't know. Maybe. But I think we were both playing roles rather than being ourselves. You were being the perfect socialite daughter. I was being the successful billionaire who checked all the boxes. Neither of us was real. And now I'm just a dad trying not to screw up too badly. It's terrifying and exhausting and the best thing I've ever done. Charlotte nodded. I'm glad you found that. Truly. She touched his arm briefly. I'm seeing someone, actually, an environmental lawyer. He grew up in foster care, has 3 rescue dogs, and thinks my father's money is more burden than blessing. My mother would be horrified. He sounds perfect for you. He is. Charlotte smiled more genuinely than Ethan had ever seen. We're both figuring out who we are without our family's expectations hanging over us. It's liberating. Good luck with that, Ethan said sincerely. You deserve happiness. So do you. Charlotte glanced at where Nia was showing some kids a poster about the Foundation's programs. Looks like you found it. After she left, Mrs. Brooks appeared at Ethan's elbow. That girl is growing up well, she said, watching Charlotte go. She is, Ethan agreed. We all are, I think. The Foundation Gala raised $2 million that night. More importantly, it established partnerships with 30 community organizations and recruited 50 volunteer lawyers willing to take cases pro bono. Sarah's vision was becoming reality. As the evening wound down, Ethan found Nia standing outside, looking at stars barely visible through the city's light pollution. Penny for your thoughts? He asked. I was thinking about Mom, Nia said, wondering if she can see this, if she knows what we built in her name. I think she knows, Ethan said, and I think she's proud. I used to be so angry at her, Nia admitted, for not fighting harder, for taking Richard's money and staying quiet, for dying and leaving me. She wiped her eyes. Now I understand she was just trying to protect everyone. Me, you, even herself. She did the best she could with impossible choices. That's very mature of you. Therapy helps, Nia said with a small laugh. Dr. Williams says forgiveness isn't about saying what happened was okay. It's about not letting it poison your future. Dr. Williams is wise. They stood together in the cool evening air. A year ago, Ethan hadn't known this child existed. Now he couldn't imagine life without her. Dad, Nia said, the words still sometimes tentative. Yeah. Thank you for coming with me that day. When I interrupted your wedding, you could have had security throw me out. You could have ignored me. But you didn't. Best decision I ever made, Ethan said. Well, second best. The best was choosing to be your father every day since. Over the following year, life settled into new rhythms. Nia started 8th grade at a school she actually liked, making friends who didn't care about her father's wealth. She joined the astronomy club and announced plans to attend space camp the next summer. Her grades were excellent, though she still struggled sometimes with feeling out of place among wealthy classmates. Mrs. Brooks published a memoir about Sarah's life, donating all proceeds to the foundation. It became a surprise bestseller, bringing Sarah's story to audiences beyond the trial coverage. Readers wrote letters sharing their own experiences with powerful people who'd try to silence them. The book gave voice to stories that usually stayed hidden. Caldwell Technologies launched new initiatives focused on digital equity, providing technology and internet access to underserved communities. The programs were profitable, but more importantly made meaningful differences. Ethan had learned that business success and social impact weren't opposites. They could be partners. One Saturday afternoon, Ethan took Nia to the church where the wedding had been interrupted. They hadn't been back since that chaotic day. Why are we here? Nia asked as they stood in the empty sanctuary. Because I wanted to thank it, Ethan said. This place was supposed to be where I made the biggest mistake of my life. Instead, it became where you saved me from making it. Nia looked around at the soaring ceilings and stained glass. It's pretty, but it would be a nice place for actual weddings. Subtle, Ethan said dryly. I'm just saying, you're not that old. You could meet someone. I'm focused on being your dad right now. You can do both. Mom would want you to be happy. Ethan pulled Nia into a side hug. I'm happy. Maybe someday I'll be ready for romance again. But there's no rush. They walked outside into sunshine. The church steps where Nia had first grabbed his hand, desperate and terrified, seemed peaceful now. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't come? Nia asked. If I'd been too scared or didn't find you in time? Sometimes, Ethan admitted. I'd have married Charlotte. Richard's schemes would have eventually collapsed and taken me down with them. Or I'd have lived my whole life never knowing you existed. He shuddered. Both options are horrible. So really, I'm the hero of this story, Nia teased. You absolutely are. 2 years after the interrupted wedding, on a spring morning full of possibility, Ethan and Nia stood at Sarah's grave. It had a proper headstone now, paid for by the foundation, with words Nia had chosen. Sarah Brooks, beloved mother, unsung hero, champion of truth. They laid flowers and stood in silence. Nia no longer cried at these visits. Instead, she talked to her mother, updating her on life, sharing achievements and struggles. I got accepted to the summer program at Space Camp, Nia told the headstone. Full scholarship because of my essay about women in STEM. And Dad's company is sponsoring 10 other kids to go too. She paused. The foundation helped 32 families this month. Your record-keeping system is what made it possible. Turns out your obsessive documentation skills were preparation for something bigger. Ethan added his own words. I wish I'd known you better, Sarah. I wish I'd fought harder to stay in touch, been less focused on work, questioned things that didn't add up. But I promise you, I'm taking care of our daughter. She's brilliant and brave and kind. She's everything you hoped she'd be. Walking back to the car, Nia slipped her hand into Ethan's. Do you think we're going to be okay? Like long-term okay? I think we already are, Ethan said. We survived the worst. Everything from here is just living. Mom used to say that surviving was how you earned the right to live. She was right about a lot of things. That evening, Nia presented Ethan with a school project, a family tree that included Sarah, Mrs. Brooks, even Charlotte in a separate branch marked almost family. At the center were 2 names, Nia and Ethan, connected by a line labeled Found Family. We weren't born into this family, Nia explained. We built it. That makes it even more real, I think. Ethan studied the project, seeing their story mapped out in colored markers and careful handwriting. A year ago, he'd been preparing to marry the wrong person for the wrong reasons. Now he had a daughter, a purpose, a life that actually meant something. You're right, he said. Found family is the strongest kind because it's chosen. Years later, when people asked Ethan about the day his wedding was interrupted, he always smiled before answering. That was the day I stopped living the life others expected and started living the life that mattered. That was the day a brave girl with an envelope full of truth saved me from my own blindness. And Nia, grown and accomplished in her own right, would add, that was the day I got my father back, even though I'd never really had him before. Turns out 5 seconds can change everything. You just have to be brave enough to take them. The story of that interrupted wedding became something bigger than scandal or corporate drama. It became a reminder that truth, however inconvenient, was worth fighting for. That family was built through action, not just biology. That power couldn't permanently silence courage. And that sometimes the biggest disasters were really disguised rescues. Sarah Brooks had understood that. She documented truth, protected her daughter, and set events in motion that would ultimately bring justice. She hadn't lived to see it, but her legacy echoed forward through the foundation that bore her name, through the daughter who carried her courage, through the man who'd finally learned what truly mattered. 5 seconds had changed everything. But what came after those 5 seconds, the choice to keep choosing truth, justice, and love, that was what made the change permanent. If someone showed up with proof that your entire life had been manipulated by the people you trusted most, would you have the courage to walk away from everything to chase the truth? If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful tales of justice, redemption, and courage.